Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live stream all about conscious beauty. I'm Karen, I'm founder of Balm Beauty, and we're a natural and organic website that represents lots and lots of independent brands here in the UK. Tonight I'm joined by two of the brands that we stock. We've got Rabia from Soap & Skin and Vanessa from Azape Naturals. But before we kind of introduce our experts, I just wanted to talk about why I decided to title this live stream Conscious Beauty. I think it's because we hear lots and lots of phrases at the moment in the beauty world of maybe it's green or clean or toxin free or chemical free, and I think there's lots of marketing terms around, and there's a lot of greenwashing around as well. And so I think conscious really makes sure that it brings it back to our own personal interpretation, our own personal ethos, and we have to decide what that is and then follow that in terms of our organic or natural or conscious beauty journey. So yeah, it's very much a considered ethos to live by. It's kind of got more of a purpose to it, and it's led by you rather than brands telling you what you should and shouldn't be buying. So that was just a little framework for tonight's chat. We're going to talk about lots and lots of different ethoses. So whether it's cruelty-free, vegan, organic, ethical, we'll do a bit of a whistle-stop tour of lots of different things so that you've got a little bit of a shopping list of things to choose and define that conscious beauty journey for yourself. So hopefully it helps. And if you've got questions, make sure you pop them in the comments and we'll answer them so that we can make sure the advice is as tailored to you as possible. So I couldn't do this alone. I'm sure people might be interested in my own personal conscious beauty journey, but that wouldn't make for a very varied conversation. So I've got two of our experts. We've got, as I said, Vanessa from Azape Naturals, which if you tuned into our sensitive skincare topic a couple of weeks ago, you'll be familiar with Vanessa, but her brand is all about kind of small batch, natural and organic ingredients. She's got very considered packaging as well. So welcome, Vanessa. It's nice to have you back.
Thank you, Karen.
Welcome. And then we've also got Rabia, who is one part of Soap & Skin, which is natural skin, facial and body skincare range. Again, made in small batches, and they also have lots and lots of multifunctional products, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But welcome, Rabia.
Thank you for having me, Karen.
You're welcome. It's good to see you both. So yeah, let's dive right in and just hear a little bit more about each of you, a bit of a refresher, Vanessa, from you about your brand and also kind of how that fits into conscious beauty and what that means for you.
Okay, so I'm the founder of Azape Naturals, and I started the brand about 3 years ago because my children, or mainly my daughter, had eczema, so I created products to help treat her skin. Like in the beginning as well, like thinking about conscious beauty, I did have my products stocked in plastic in the beginning, and then afterwards realising how that affects the environment and like how bad it is, I decided to put my packaging in the glass, and then my lids were still plastic, and then like a year afterwards I changed that to aluminium as well to try and be better. And in the future I hope that my labels will be biodegradable as well.
Amazing. Lovely small steps that make a big difference, and in it you're right, it's that journey, isn't it? And you've got to start somewhere and just keep kind of progressing on that kind of conscious journey. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And Rabia, tell us a little bit about Soap & Skin and how that kind of might fit into people's conscious beauty regimes.
Okay, so I'm co-founder of Soap & Skin. We are a multitasking skincare and body care all natural beauty brand. We launched 5 years ago, actually, this month. And we've taken inspiration from our dual heritage, so we're British and our Eastern heritage, and sort of taken inspiration from the rituals that you find there in that region. We just found that our back home, our heritage
often talked about multitasking products, using one product for a myriad of ways. And that's what we loved about the multifunctioning products that you can use in different ways. So that's kind of our ethos, trying to bring a little bit of those rituals and that frugality to the UK. In addition, we do use glass jars and bottles, and all of our boxes and bottles and jars are all manufactured in the UK in an attempt to sort of be kinder on the planet and sort of save on those environmental costs.
Yeah, I think we'll get into it in a bit more detail later, but it's so hard to choose different ways to approach things of being conscious, you know, whether it's better to have it here in the UK, or if actually that's a more intensive ingredient to grow, for example, in the UK, and it's better to ship it from somewhere else. So it is so complex. So again, that's why I kind of think it's really good if you can personalize it to you and not just follow the kind of status quo. So yeah, thank you for sharing that as well, Rob. Yeah, we're going to start by defining lots of different ethoses. As I said, it's going to be a bit of a roadshow of ethoses. We're going to talk about being kind to the planet, kind to animals, kind to people, and you know, we couldn't have this conversation. We're all natural and organic beauty lovers without talking about natural and organic as well. And then we'll hopefully round off by giving you some tips on maybe how to change, how to think more consciously about your products, and talk about our own regimes as well, which will hopefully be interesting. So let's start with being kind to animals. Like Vanessa, what does the term cruelty-free mean? That's, you know, pretty standard in the UK and Europe, not necessarily over in the rest of the world, but for here in the UK, what does cruelty-free mean?
So, none of the products are tested on animals, and I think the ingredients as well shouldn't be tested on animals.
Okay, and is that across the UK? Is that in Europe?
The whole of Europe, the EU legislations, they don't allow us to test on animals.
Okay. And how do you feel about this, Rabia, if you know, a brand sells in the UK and in Europe, and they also sell, you know, internationally as well? What are the kind of blurred lines there that we should be mindful of?
I mean, I guess it's easier with the brands that sell in the EU because of obviously the marketing ban, and I mean that legislation's been in place for quite a while to protect animal rights, but actually a lot of countries are now following suit and did follow suit. So we have quite a few countries, from what I was reading, places like India, Turkey, and New Zealand actually weren't too far behind when the EU introduced a ban on animal rights testing or animal testing. So they actually don't either. So I guess it's more the countries that advocate or have it as part of their legislation that you have to test on animals to be able to sell in that country. And I believe China is one of those countries where by law, to be able to sell beauty products, you need to have tested on animals.
Yeah, I think historically that's been the case, but I read earlier this week that that's shifting. But it was really there was some ambiguity about it. So I need to swat up a little bit more on that, because it could be a fantastic change, but I think it's not quite as clear cut as it is here in the EU.
Yeah, I mean, we've got places like Australia who actually just the beginning of this month made it illegal and banned animal testing on their cosmetic products as well. So that was Australia, and I think USA are not far behind as well, with certain states already banning it. And I believe with the China case, it's a case of there's a pilot scheme from Leaping Bunny, whereby they are trying to sort of mediate both sort of viewpoints to a certain extent and get that pushed forward.
Yeah, it's certainly a big grey area, and I think that's why certification bodies have been so prevalent. Like you mentioned, the Leaping Bunny, there's PETA. Do you have how does the certification help us to know more about the kind of cruelty-free credentials of the product, Vanessa?
I think they are usually the company can't sell into other countries that that do the test on animals. I think they have to not be allowed to test to get third parties to test on their on animals as well. I think that's because I was reading up about the Leaping Bunny program, and I think they're not allowed to get other companies to test on animals as well. So that's how they become registered as cruelty-free.
Yeah, and do you think, we're very lucky here in the EU where it's completely standardised, which is fantastic because you almost know that whatever you're buying is cruelty-free. But do you think you also need to have that certification to give it that sort of extra seal of approval, Vanessa, or do you think it's okay because you're only selling in the EU?
I think that it's okay, but I think to give consumers more trust in the brand, it is a good thing to have. But for me, because I'm quite small at the moment, it's not something that I've gone for right now, but it is something I would like to do in the future, though.
Another one of those steps on the journey as you grow. So
yeah.
Rabia, how about you? What do you think about the kind of certification and the standards here in the UK and the EU?
Well, it's quite reassuring being in the EU that you've got that legislation in place to protect brands and to protect consumers, as well as obviously ensuring animal rights and animals aren't harmed in the process of obviously creating these products. What I do find is that the different bodies have such vast differences in what they deem as criteria to be certified. So I think the Leaping Bunny is the most comprehensive in terms of there are quite strict sort of regulations and you have to jump over quite a lot of hoops to be able to sort of get yourself accredited. But unfortunately for small brands, it's extremely expensive. So if you are an independent small brand, the cost just isn't justifiable. As much as I know Soap and Skin and many other indie brands would love to be certified with Leaping Bunny because it's obviously internationally recognized, it's just financially not viable for a lot of small brands. And that's where I guess that reassurance of being EU based really helps, because then you sort of feel as though, okay, we are cruelty-free, we're based in the EU, so hopefully that's enough of a indication for consumers to know that our ethics are in place. And obviously any sort of delving into any brand's ethos on their website, on their social media pages, it's quite clear as to which direction they're going or what they're driving for. So that's quite...
And ask questions as well. Like, independent brands are cool and exciting for a reason because they've got personality behind them. They're not these huge big corporate machines. So there's people like me and you and Vanessa behind the brands, and we welcome questions and we welcome connecting with people. So I think if in doubt, just ask and do a bit of extra research as well to answer the questions. Another kind of ethos, and these are not exhaustive, we're just kind of giving as many options as possible, but another one that's really, really popular at the moment, and rightly so, is vegan beauty products. Vanessa, what does it mean when a beauty product is vegan?
It means that it doesn't use any animal-based ingredients, so like beeswax and honey or any milk or anything in there, goat's milk and stuff in their beauty products. They wouldn't be used in a vegan product.
And why do you think veganism or vegan beauty is becoming so popular nowadays?
I think because people are realising how animals shouldn't really be used for our benefit. And they're treated quite cruelly as well to get the milk or honey or whatever from the animals. So I think it's the treatment really that is cruel. So then it kind of, with the cruelty-free, it kind of goes hand in hand with vegan, because then if the animals are being treated cruelly, then it would be the vegan kind of goes with it.
Yeah, but do you think that necessarily a vegan product that's made outside the EU can also be cruelty-free? I think it's maybe important to flag that you have to still be quite careful. Yeah,
they're not always. Because cruelty-free doesn't mean vegan, because they can still contain like beeswax and things. So like my product, it contains beeswax, but it is cruelty-free.
Yeah, it's not been tested on the animals rather than
But it's not
animals used to make the product. So yeah, again, it just highlights how ambiguous it can be. I heard a really interesting podcast the other day. Someone was saying, like, can it actually be classed as vegan if those plant-based ingredients in natural skincare are grown using manure from a horse or a cow? I had never thought of it that way before. Rabia, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a Pandora's box. Everyone will have a different interpretation of what they deem vegan and what they don't. And I guess if you look at the very nature of growing crops and in the field, you could probably, by that stance, never truly have anything vegan, because even on a field, you will have cows, cats coming down perhaps on a field and just sort of relieving themselves. So you would essentially have animal matter in the soil naturally. So I think that's a very interesting debate, which I never actually even considered.
No. Or even we absolutely love organic ingredients, but or even natural ingredients in skincare products, but then naturally grown ingredients might use pesticides, which can kill insects to make the crop, grow as as well as possible. So there's just so many facets that we don't know about. Summer, who is the other half of Soap and Skin, is watching tonight, and she's saying, is there enough transparency from brands on animal testing in the UK? Vanessa, what do you think? Do you think people try to dodge the question, or do you think largely people are pretty honest?
I think that they are mainly quite honest in the UK about if they, well, I think a lot don't really test on animals. It's usually the bigger brands that I hear of that, they're selling in China and things, and then people stop using them. So I think it's something that is quite well known if a brand is doing things like that.
I think I've said when we did the vegan live stream a few weeks ago, that just check, as you said quite rightly, Vanessa, some of the larger companies, you might resonate with a brand and they might have a vegan or cruelty-free brand, but just look at their umbrella company, who owns them, and just check maybe the credentials of all of them, because in quite high likelihood they'll use similar manufacturing hubs. They'll obviously try to get economies of scale, and it's operated by this one conglomerate. So yeah, if you're really wanting to be strict on it, then just fact check who, if anyone, owns that company or brand above them. So yeah. I think, Chantal's made a really great comment. Hi, Chantal. It drives me nuts how vegan does not mean cruelty-free. If there is animal cruelty, it's not vegan. Rabia, do you agree with that?
Again, I think it's just very much open to debate. I think the whole drive and the popularity of veganism has really increased over the last few years, purely because we've seen just how human demand for animal-based products has led to mass farming, really inhumane conditions of some of these animals that are being literally just bred for slaughter or bred to be used for our purposes. So on that facet, it's very much true. I do believe it. But then in things like, for example, honey and beeswax, a lot of people will say, well, that's not deemed nice, or that's still deemed cruel towards the bees. And I think there are ways around it as well. So, for example, we use both beeswax and honey in our formulations in some of our products. And we've actually gone to the extent of sourcing from a not-for-profit apiary based up in Nottinghamshire, who literally their primary sort of objective is to the welfare of the British bees in their care, and they only sell the surplus of what they have. So in essence, their priority is not a commercially sort of angled. It's all about trying to obviously nurture the bee population, obviously the British bee population in that area. So they only sell very small quantities, and we're the only brand or the commercial sort of relationship that they have in terms of what they have, because it's very small, and so it's very much based on what they have as well. So obviously there might be days, or there might be seasons where the surplus is stock is not obviously quite sufficient, so obviously that would affect our ability to produce as well. So far we're small enough where it's, you know, it's manageable, and we've been able to get by for the last 5 years, but that's one way around it when you look at these different angles in how you sort of source products that might not be in essence vegan, but can still be cruelty-free.
Yeah, and then I suppose actually you make a great point. Like, as you grow, it then becomes an ethical question, doesn't it? Like, Vanessa, if you're growing your brand and you're starting to use up valuable resources, maybe, for example, the rosemary in your body butter, how would you manage that if you got to that point where you were thinking, oh, hang on a minute, I'm actually using up a lot of crop in doing this? Like, how do you think you might approach that as your brand gets bigger?
I realise I've not actually ever thought of that, but
it's quite a philosophical question for a Thursday night. Sorry, but put you on the spot.
I think maybe I could inform my customers maybe and make possibly another. I could possibly make another body butter, because I am planning to launch more different scents of body butters. Maybe stop making that one for a time and bring out another lavender fragrance or something else to try and manage that amount, or have a smaller amount and say this is the amount I've got in stock for the time, and then once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
Maybe something like that, but I'm not sure, to be honest.
It's fine. It was a big question, big question. I think let's talk about another aspect of conscious beauty, which again is coming to the fore. We're in Plastic-Free July right now, and that is to be kind to the planet. Rabia, how do you think we can be more environmentally conscious with our beauty products?
Oh gosh, there's so many different ways. I think it's literally, I think the most standout, I think, or the easiest way is probably to not be excessive in your purchases. So trying to avoid those impulse buys, trying to really not jump on the bandwagon. And, it's very easy to get swayed with the latest ingredient or the latest it product, buy a product, find it doesn't suit you, and then it ends up in landfill. And I'd say those impulse purchases are probably the most wasteful and probably the most damaging to our environment, because not only do they end up in obviously landfill, but obviously the process that they went through to being manufactured and crafted and formulated are all resources of the earth that have been wasted. And then I guess it's just things like sustainable ingredients, trying to be mindful of some of the ingredients that you might want to avoid, things like palm oil, although it's a natural ingredient, but we've heard in the news over a number of years now the impact that it's having on our kind of on a global scale, the deforestation, and obviously the threat to wildlife and the effect on our climate. I'm just thinking, trying to be mindful, trying to avoid plastics. A lot of independent brands are switching to glass, are switching to recyclable materials. So those are a great option. Trying to find things locally, so perhaps supporting your local businesses, somewhere where things are not being shipped, hundreds of miles, and you're not buying something that's got a warehouse, I don't know, in Germany or something. So trying to source something locally. So obviously you're saving on, transport costs and fuel emissions in that respect. And I'm just trying to think in terms of ingredients. Yeah, there's a whole host, I guess, petrochemicals, which again are derived from crude oil, petroleum, but obviously the whole process in which they're being processed and refined is massively polluting. It affects our atmosphere. It releases toxins into our atmosphere. And obviously there are questions recently about how safe they are to use as well. I think those for me would be the three biggest things that I would try and avoid, or try and be mindful of when trying to be a bit more conscious, and trying to use a lot of reusable items. So things like reusable makeup removing rounds that you can just sort of bung in the oven, bung in the washing machine, or wash by hand, or.
We've talked a little bit about ingredients. Chantal's asking, how do you trace your ingredients and the fair trade behind them? Vanessa, can you share with us how you source your ingredients and what kind of sustainable kind of things that you consider when you're looking for the ingredients that go into your products?
For me, I usually buy from well-known ingredient suppliers that as well they have on their website where they buy their ingredients from. And then they help some of the communities as well, especially the ones in Africa with the shea butter, and that they help them, and they have that information on their website. I remember as well, like when I went to, it's not ingredients, it's more packaging, but when I went on a course with Naturally Thinking, they were talking about, I can't remember what the subject was, but they mentioned that they went to visit one of their suppliers in China and they saw that there was like children working there and that, so they decided to take that contract away from them and move to a different supplier. So hearing things like that, you can kind of trust because I buy from Naturally Thinking, I trust them because they are quite open about like their suppliers and everything as well. That helps.
Yeah, I suppose where we've been encouraging you to ask us questions, we've also got to ask the brands to ask their suppliers questions. Rabia knows very well about how much I ask questions about the ingredients, where they're from, and if we can change something or find it in a different way. So yeah, I think you've maybe just got to try and find somewhere that is doing that work on your behalf, because it's such an involved process. I mean, I research ingredients, for fun, but also part of the job for putting all the products out into Brahma. But Vanessa, do you spend a lot of time doing research, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, I did used to, like in the beginning, but because I'm kind of settled with what I'm buying now, I don't really anymore. But yeah, I did used to spend quite a lot of time like thinking how is this impacting as well, like trying to source ingredients locally as well. Like I said, I buy from Naturally Thinking, they're quite local to me, and I know they get their peppermint and lavender quite local as well. So it's good to, if we can, buy as local as possible to help with like the environment and everything, and it's not travelling as far as well.
Yeah. Another question we've got, do you track green miles or the ecological impact of your products, and how do you measure this? Beauty miles is, again, a buzzword that is coming to the forefront in the beauty industry. Should we be measuring beauty miles, Rabia? Is it the main thing we should be measuring, or are there other measurements we should be also considering? There's a lot to think about on that one.
There is so much to think about. I think it gets so easy to get swept away with all these terminologies and all these latest sort of trendy sort of buzzwords. And I think if you look at the core ethics of any brand, and it's easier with an independent or a smaller brand, their ethics will be really interwoven into how they do everything. From the day one, it's going to be one of the priorities of what they do. So it's not going to be an afterthought. It's usually heavily ingrained in everything that they're doing. So in terms of things like tracking beauty miles, it might be something whereby if you've focused so much on trying to ensure that the ingredients you are buying are ethically sourced. So, for example, they may be organic, so that they've got the proper organic certification, that they're having a positive impact on the environment around them, the purchasing of a certain product, but it's also benefiting communities as well. So, communities are being paid fairly, and then the whole getting those ingredients over, if those have all been assessed at a micro level from the beginning, then things like beauty miles just become sort of trendy terms that sort of just add extra layers that don't really necessarily need to if it's already ingrained in that business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit. But I think another way to look at it as well is like, I always think of things like from soil to skin and beyond. So, the transport is a huge factor, and even buying online, I think people underestimate the transport that's involved in buying things in the fashion industry. You know, particularly, you buy things, you return it, you buy it, you return it. Like that has an impact that you don't always, it's not always tangible. But I think even from the at the soil part, it's the transport, but it's also the manufacturing process. Is it cold pressed, which is, you know, much more considerately done, or does it have to go into, you know, a mechanical process to be done, to be extracted? And so it's really hard to define which is the most important of those areas. But I think in terms of beauty miles, if you know that you can get the best lavender just over the pond in France from Provence, why are you buying it from some, you know, really aggressively farmed plantation somewhere else across the world? So I think it's about looking at it on an ingredient basis. Would you agree with that, Vanessa, that it really depends on what ingredient it is, as to which thing you would prioritize? Or am I just going off on a complete tangent?
No, I agree with that. Yeah, I think if you can buy it, the closer to home you can get the ingredient, I think the better, really.
Okay. Yeah. Even if it was better quality from somewhere else? I know it's difficult. It is.
I think, yeah, you've got to consider really how much the better quality it is, and will your customers notice? Would it matter to them? And then kind of weigh up what you think is best, really.
Okay. Another question: are there any ingredients you avoid for ethical or ecological reasons? Which ones and why? Rabia, have you got any in mind that you can think of? I mean, you mentioned palm oil.
Well, yeah, I guess that, and as formulators as well. So my co-founder Summer does our formulating for us. So we're quite conscious of things like sulfates, because we realize, obviously, and we've seen the effects personally, and obviously read the reams of research out there that associates how harsh these synthetic chemicals are. So we don't formulate with sulfate. So all of our soaps are sulfate free. It's one of those products or one of those ingredients which is very cheap, used on a mass scale by a lot of large brands, because we've been conditioned to think that suds and foam and lather is what you need to cleanse your skin. And that's actually the biggest myth out there. You really don't. You can gently cleanse without stripping away the natural oils on your skin, and without causing, and I mean, these things literally affect the sort of microbiome of your skin. So obviously they disrupt that, and then you've got things like skin allergies and skin irritation, and obviously skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis end up flaring up as a result of prolonged use of sulfate. So sulfates is definitely one of those, and we are big. We don't like using synthetic fragrance or perfumes either. So we have lovely essential oil blends in all of our products, which have been carefully curated and carefully blended, using as much as, obviously, if it's available locally, then it will be a local lavender, for example, if we're using lavender. So those are very carefully considered. And again, things with synthetic fragrance and perfume is that term on the ingredients list hides a plethora of, hundreds of synthetic compounds and ingredients that make up one component of your fragrance, and it causes allergies, irritation. Some can be carcinogenic, you just don't know. So you're very much blind when you are using synthetic fragrance as to what exactly is in that concoction, so to speak. And I guess those are our main things, and petrochemicals. Okay. I stay clear of anything, so mineral oils, petroleum jelly. Personally, as formulators and for personal use, I would stay clear of that as well. It's one of those no-nos in my household.
Nice. Vanessa, how about you? Any ones you would add to avoid?
Not really. I think Abby covered all of the ones that I had in mind, actually, as well. Like the paraffin wax as well in many products. That's like petroleum based as well. I think those mainly. So a lot of those like petroleum based are found in like even eczema creams and things like that as well,
right.
which don't really even help the condition.
Well, and the funny thing is, I mean, things like petroleum jelly were actually sort of formulated during wartime to actually be a preventative barrier for wounds to prevent them from actually getting infected. They weren't there to actually moisturize or to nourish the skin. It was purely there as a synthetic sort of, not synthetic, but to act as barriers to stop infection. And it's the mind boggles. So many people swear by petroleum jelly for lips and things, for chapped and dried lips, but they don't understand that the reason why it works is it's preventing moisture from leaving, as opposed to actually nourishing your lips and hydrating your lips. They don't actually hydrate. It's just a barrier.
I personally think it makes my lips worse when I used to use it in the past before switching. It was just like a never-ending story of constantly having to apply Vaseline. Like, use something that you're going to have to put on once, and that's going to keep your skin really beautiful. I think one for me is, and I think it comes from food a lot of the time. A lot of things in the beauty industry are led by food, which is great because, you know, what you eat also brings itself out in your skin as well. But I think almonds have been really, really popular because obviously people are changing to plant-based milks, not using dairy products. Absolutely fantastic. But I think the amount of water that you need to use to grow those almonds, and they're really grown in a very dense area. I think it's in California. That's like a majority of the world's production. To me, you know, we do stock products that have got almond oil in, but I think this is something that's going to become much more prevalent as the demand increases, is that, you know, the water consumption of it, the fact that you're relying on one particular area for it, and, you know, you're then having to ship that from all over the world. So I think that's quite an interesting one. But yeah, I don't think it's got quite there yet. But all I would say is, you know, you can get, we did a vegan blog the other week about, you know, how to replace beeswax in products, and there's two waxes, Candelilla and Canoba, I can never pronounce that, and you can get them where they are farmed sustainably, but you have to check. So I think it's just about transparency as much as it is about the particular ingredients. I think we just all have a huge part to play in trying to be as transparent as possible. And that kind of leads on to another comment that we've had. Do you feel that by trying to make an ethical beauty product, you are more harshly or unfairly judged for how ethical you are, rather than companies that maybe kind of keep it quiet and don't shout about their ethical credentials? Vanessa, do you feel a bit under fire because you're advocating, you know, plastic free, you're advocating natural and organic ingredients? Do you feel under a spotlight, or do you think that you've been quite welcomed for those feelings? Okay.
Yeah, I've not really had anything negative like about the things that I advocate. I haven't really had anything bad about that. I think people quite welcome it, really. But I think if they don't, then they kind of just stay away. They don't really come and say anything, or maybe just I'm not big enough yet.
Good.
That happened to me.
And I guess in terms of the price point, you know, you do pay more of a premium for more ethically sourced things, products, ingredients. Do you think people understand that when they're buying your products?
I actually don't think they do, really. I think you maybe compare and be like, oh, why is it so expensive? Maybe you don't ask, but I think that people do sometimes think like that, because, like, as well, for example, my chamomile oil that I buy, it costs quite a lot. I buy it from actually thinking it costs quite a lot, and then I found from another company and they're selling like less than half the price, and like, how comes it's so cheap? But then it is how it's sourced and everything as well.
I think you can feel it in the in the product, you know, facial oils are the mainstay of natural and organic beauty, and I've tried a lot of facial oils in my time, testing lots of products, and I think you can tell the difference between, you know, a good quality and a bad quality. So I guess it's just about getting that message across, and, you know, once people try your products, they're definitely very, very loyal, because they're fantastic. So yeah. So Rabia, what do you think about that? Do you guys feel pressure, or are you quite happy and supported from our lovely community?
Our community is very lovely. I think they do also understand that the smaller you are, it's in an ideal world where finances aren't a constraint, you could really push the boundaries and push the boat out and really demand, you know, certain things from your suppliers and your ingredients, and from, you know, from all your suppliers. But as a small brand, as a 2-woman brand, we are literally just myself and Summer. It's very difficult. We don't have that bargaining power, and finances obviously hinder our, I mean, we would love to be able to do so much more than what we are able to do, and it's just about taking little baby steps, as long as you know what your main goal is and push forward with that. It's about making those little steps towards being as ethical and sustainable as you can. And I think one of the ways I think that was the most evident for us was the way we sourced our argan oil. It was one of those things whereby we were fortunate enough, and we can't do this for every single ingredient just because of the size of our brand, but we were fortunate enough to have actually visited Morocco when we were looking for argan oil suppliers. And it just shows you how in different scenarios, legislation and interpretation vary so much from what we expect here in the UK. So we were visiting, or we must have visited about 3 or 4 women's cooperatives. And as a UK person, you assume a cooperative means that these women that are working there all have an equal share, or have a share in the business and have a right to the profit that they are making. But it's only, and that's what they advocate, and that's what they tell the foreigners and the people that are coming there to visit these farms, that that's what's happening. But it's only if you take a step back and actually break away and perhaps speak to one of these women, you actually discover that's not really the case, especially in a place like Morocco. There's no government legislation, there's no regulation there with these sort of terms. And it's a case of, you actually do discover there's no concept of a cooperative really out there. They've noticed that Westerners love that term and love what it means, and so have actually banded it up. And it's very easy to take you into a room where you see lots of women sitting there grinding the nuts and being told, yeah, these are, you know, this is a cooperative, but the reality is actually very, very different. And that's what we discovered, and we discovered it was the case with so many places. And I think just as, you know, we were sort of thinking, resigning ourselves to the fact that, okay, there is no way around this, and we really wanted to use argan oil and we couldn't figure out what the best way to proceed was, we were fortunate enough to have come across a wonderful place where the first thing they actually said was, we are not a cooperative. And we are, this is our farm, we employ 600 Berber women, but we pay them a fair wage. And they provide other facilities to them. So for example, there's free childcare, free education for the women's children that are, you know, working on the farms. So it was about sort of looking at the bigger picture. So for example, in this case in particular, going for what we deem as ethical, being a cooperative wasn't really truly ethical. It was going via a different road and staring off and sort of really doing that research and trying to find somebody who was ethical, but not necessarily a cooperative, it turned out, but they were paying a really good wage. And then it was the standards of living that they were able to give them, and the standard of health and education that they were able to give their dependents, that made such a difference. And like Vanessa said, you look at the differences in the price of those argan oil. I mean, we pay a ridiculous amount for our argan oil, but it was a cost that we felt was so justified when you are able to see the impact that it's having locally on those people, versus getting something cheaper and then not really sort of, and being a party to something that's not really, that's false, or it's an illusion, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, it's astounding. Like, that story is just from one ingredient. I mean, you guys have, I don't know, what, 10 products in your range? And blends of lots of different ingredients. The intensity of that process to have to check that, but it's something that I think should definitely be done. And, you know, it all rolls up into actually the kind of next bit that we're going to move on to, which is ethical approaches to people and ethical approaches to business practices. Because again, I think when you see that product in your hand, before you put it on your skin, you don't necessarily think back all the way through those little processes that have happened to get that to you and for you to spend money on that. And I guess it's almost like the darker side of the beauty industry, that people aren't shouting about their business practices. In fact, a lot of places maybe are trying to cover things up. And, you know, how do you ensure, Vanessa, that you're being as ethical as you absolutely can be when it comes to making your products? Or you know, how, I know you're a one-man band, so to speak, but if you know, you're looking back to your suppliers, how do you check with them that they're conducting themselves ethically, so you're kind of passing that on in the chain?
Like I said before, I do kind of check their websites to see where they do buy the ingredients from and everything. And I wouldn't say that I go deep into it like how Rabia did, like go to the actual areas and check everything and all that. I would love to really do things like that, but I do buy all my ingredients from the UK, so if I have any doubts, I do ask them usually, like, where do they get this and that from and how it's sourced and things like that. But yeah, going deep like how Rabia did, I think is really quite good.
But like I said, it's not easy to do that as a small brand. That's just one ingredient, but we haven't, you know, you can't do it for, there's a plethora of ingredients in everyone's formulations, and you can't do that for everyone. So there has to be an element of trust and choosing suppliers that you trust to sort of do the vetting process for you where you can't.
Yeah, I think maybe to go back to an earlier point is, do we feel pressure? Me as a retailer rather than a brand, I feel an enormous amount of pressure, because I am saying I have handpicked these products for our customers because we think they're the bee's knees, and we think they're really effective, and we think they, you know, are sustainably, you know, conscious with the packaging, they're ethically sourced, and, you know, I'm putting so much trust in the brands, and also believing that what we're told is the correct thing, to pass that on, and, you know, use my knowledge to, you know, scratch a little bit deeper into that question. But you do sort of live in fear that the next big thing will come up and you'll be like, oh, I wasn't prepared for that. And actually I've not been behaving in that way, and I probably should have. And I think it's just about being curious and about doing as much as you possibly can and being really honest about it, and being, you know, I always say we try to explain every ingredient. Well, as we're growing, the list of ingredients is growing too, and we haven't got every single ingredient, you know, annotated on the website yet, because it's this eternal work in progress. But that's like the absolute goal, because I want people to have that knowledge that every single ingredient that they're putting on their skin, like, we've checked and we've researched and we've made sure that it's okay. So I think as long as you're trying to be as transparent as possible, and I think Chantal's made another great point, is that as we come out of this pandemic, there's going to be more ethical questions. We're lucky, we're all sort of like very, very small businesses. None of us have any employees yet. But other bigger brands who've maybe got employees, they've maybe furloughed staff, they're making them redundant. You know, some brands may be seeming to do it as a bit of a, you know, a nice way out, a bit of a cost saving. Do you think that's going to be the next big ethical question in the beauty industry? How you treat your people, and how you treat your employees?
I definitely think yes. I think, of course, I mean, just looking at just your suppliers is a very narrow vision of what you would deem ethical. I think it starts with how you treat your employees, the people who are in your sort of hub with you, and giving them fair rights and giving them flexibility. I think that's should have always been, not necessarily just because of the pandemic, but that should always be at the forefront of a truly ethical brand, because obviously everyone is equal, everyone has the same obligations, the same responsibilities. So you can't sort of become so profit driven whereby you are sort of completely not taking these elements into consideration. So I think very much so. It's and it actually in recent sort of weeks that we've been listening to the news, it's actually really put a emphasis on the kind of brands and companies that I myself have now said I want nothing to do with you guys if this is how you treat the people who are literally work so hard to get you where you are and are crucial for the operation and the smooth running of any brand or business. How could you treat them like that? So it's obviously been a huge game changer in the way I view other brands if they've mistreated employees and not given them sort of fair rights and abused them, so to speak.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we've been quite lucky. A lot of people have rallied round independence, which has been so fantastic. And we just have to keep living up to that wonderful banner that people give us of how independents are so great, and as we grow, hopefully still embody those ethics. But I hope we've talked a lot about lots of different ethoses: fair trade, ethical, cruelty-free, vegan. We've barely even talked about organic and natural, but hopefully that's kind of come through, that we're obviously also passionate about that, and we think it's good for the environment, we think it's good for our skin. But I think we should probably talk now about how we're going to switch, or how we're going to consider a conscious beauty regime. So what steps can be taken to make more of a conscious beauty regime? Do you think, Vanessa, what would you say is maybe the first thing to do? Be like, oh, I'd like to be more conscious. Where do I start?
I think it would depend on each individual, like what's the most important thing to you. So is it more about the animals, or is it more about the environment? They kind of do as well go hand in hand with the animals and the environment, because obviously animals live in the environment, it affects them as well. So it's really, you've got to take your time and see what's the most important. So like for me, when I was switching, it wasn't really about any of those things. It was more about our health, because my daughter's eczema. It was, I want to use natural because it's better for us. So that was like my first step in changing. And then as I grew, like in the industry, I kind of realized about plastic, how it's not good for us, and then the sulfates and things like that, that's not good for the environment, and what it can do to even marine life and things like that. So I think it's right at each personal decision what's the most important to you, really, but it is something that will take time.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think what I did when I decided I wanted to change was I made a list of things that were important to me, and then I ranked that list. Very logical about these things, and I made sure that when I was looking to swap things out, I followed that list. Does it tick those boxes? And like Rabia was saying earlier, not to be impulsive, I wasn't just swayed by, oh, it's got a green label with flowers on it, like that must mean it's organic. Doesn't. Stick to your list, check your list, take your time over it. So yeah, great advice in there. Rabia, if we're looking at our existing products, how do we check if they match that list that we've made in our heads or in a spreadsheet, if people do that?
I think I guess it depends on what's on your list. So, for example, if you want to move to cleaner ingredients, more natural and organic ingredients, then I guess the first step would be to look at the back of the ingredients packaging and look at the INCI list and have a look at the list of ingredients. And that will also sort of help arm you so that you don't get greenwashed by a lot of big brands that claim to be natural, claim to be organic, fill you these lovely sort of fibs, if you like, and then when you turn the lists around and have a look at what's on their ingredients, you discover actually maybe there's only 10% of actual real natural ingredients, and the rest is all cheap fillers and bulking agents or synthetically derived. So that's probably one of the best ways to go about for on an ingredients perspective, if you really want to opt for something more organic and natural, be mindful of what's in those formulations. I guess the other thing would be things like plastic, trying to find products which you can refill or perhaps switch. So I know soap has made a huge comeback, the Humble Soap Bar, and I think that's wonderful because you've not got so much excessive plastic in these pumps and shampoo bottles and all the rest of it. It's a soap bar, usually wrapped in paper or in a cardboard box, easily recyclable, and it also promotes minimal waste because you literally use it till it's absolutely finished. So that would be another amazing way to sort of go about checking or trying to be thinking of ways outside, sort of trying to find ways into making that switch. So ingredients, I guess your packaging, where it's manufactured, is it all made locally? Or if the packaging that is being sort of, if the product is being sort of, is in packaging, is it recyclable? So things like glass are infinitely recyclable. So that makes it an easier sort of thing. Or can you repurpose the glass jar or the glass bottle for something else? That's another way. And trying to invest in reusable items. So I think, like I mentioned before, things like cotton rounds that are washable are so much better for the environment than disposable cotton pads that you get, or perhaps face wipes, which are the #1 enemy of your skin and of the environment. So do not use face wipes, but just trying to be mindful and sort of switch these things out gradually. And I guess that's probably how I would approach it if I was trying to be a little bit more conscious and ethical and make that switch.
Chantal's asking me what's on my list on my spreadsheet. I'm very, very sad. I mean, it's definitely evolved as I have gone through the kind of transition as to what I look for. But in the beginning, it was organic ingredients if they can be grown organically. And then the more I researched on particular ingredients, the more I've kind of narrowed down what can and can't be, and what's acceptable if it's naturally derived, if it's more stable in the formulation, for example, like a lactic acid or citric acid or something. So it'd be organic, then natural. And I'm going to say something quite controversial here, because we have lots of brands that are certified, and certification is great. Don't get me wrong, because if you're not into doing the research, you want to go and buy something from someone that you trust and they've done that hard work for you, certification is fantastic. I'm not dissing certification anyway, but because I looked into ingredients so carefully, I got very good at reading Inky List and would know, okay, so that's organically grown, or natural. So I would be able to tell in a product that wasn't certified that it was still, passable, it was still okay, it still matched up to my kind of rules. I think cruelty-free as standard. I'm vegetarian, I'm not vegan, so for me, I think beeswax and honey are absolutely fine. But again, as Rabia said, I've got to kind of understand where it's coming from. So we ask our brands about that quite often. And then the last thing for me, sustainably minded packaging for me is important, and it is a great ideal to work towards. But again, it's got to not be at the cost of the what's the word, kind of credibility of the product, if you like. So if you've got a water-based moisturizer, for example, that has, it's maybe got a light preservative in it, but it's in a pot, if you're constantly dipping your hand into that, that's not a way to keep it fresh and to keep it, giving you the benefits for your skin. So you might, depending on your ethos, you might want to go for, well, I'd like less preservative because I don't like the idea of naturally derived preservatives or, synthetically produced ones if you're, that way inclined. So you might go for an airless pump, for example. So there was a little bit of shades of grey, so that was kind of my priority. And I would then assess the product and say, look, do I prefer what this is going to do for my skin and my health versus over, you know, the kind of sustainable impact, because I would then try to make sure that I could dispose of it in a considerate way. So I think if I could give anyone one piece of advice, you're going to be constantly balancing your conscience when you are doing a sustainable or an ethical or an organic regime, because you will have to play something off against each other. I'm yet to find an absolutely perfect product unless you could keep it in a completely sealed environment and only, you know, dispense it with gloves and, you know, whatever. But I think that's the future, maybe in some sci-fi world. So yeah, I think just balance and prioritize would be two kind of takeaways I would give from when I made the switch. We'll move on to another question. So Shakira is asking, I believe consumers want to switch to more ethical brands, but are put off by cost or availability. How can you help consumers overcome these barriers? We sort of touched on that a little bit earlier, didn't we, Vanessa? But how do you think you can justify the cost of your products to new customers, for example, that don't know necessarily how much goes into the sourcing of your ingredients?
Probably just to explain to them how you do source your ingredients so that they have a better understanding. And as well, like for me, I have different sizes as well of my products, so it is like cheaper as well for them if they are a first-time customer, like samples as well, to try it and see if they appreciate the product enough to spend more money on it as well. I think that helps.
Yeah, I think another great tip, because you kind of want to try a little bit before you invest, because like Rabia said, you don't want to have to maybe give the product away or throw the product away. I think as well, another good piece of advice for the cost is trying to find multitasking products. Now, Rabia, all of your products can be multitasked in lots of different ways, and that helps you to get more value out of it. How does that happen?
I think that's been actually a core of our ethos from quite a while. So it was basically taking the inspiration, and it's just about being really clever in the way you use a product. So I think I'll tell you a story actually. So we were at a fair, and we were and it's just a story of how a product could have been sold as a multitasking product, but instead they were marketing the exact same product for different things. So essentially there is a beauty brand out there, no names, that sells essentially 3 products. One is a hair mask, one is a makeup remover, and the other one is literally a moisturizer. And they are marketed in 3 different bottles with 3 different labels with 3 different names. But this product, now being educated or being a savvy consumer, you can turn around and have a look at the ingredients, and it was all the same product.
In
now,
the same concentrations as well, or?
It was literally coconut oil.
Coconut oil, yeah, I know
and
that
that's
brand.
it, nothing else. They were marketing and selling coconut oil in very fancy, beautiful jars at very inflated prices and naming them 3 different things.
You can
And when
tell
I
me who it
actually
was
remember
after.
saying to the rep, oh, so I can just buy one and do all 3, she sort of looked a bit bewildered and didn't know how to answer. And she said, well, yes, essentially you could. So that is how, I mean, if you were sort of unaware, you could be duped into buying 3 different products, which were exactly the same thing. And but it could have still have been switched around, and she could have just sold it as a multitasking product that is better for the environment, 1 bottle, myriad of uses.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example of how you can do things. So, for example, our body butters, our skin deep body butters, our SOS balm, our elixir, and our soaps are all, and our face and body mask are all multifunctioning products, and they've been inspired by rituals whereby we are encouraged to use one thing for different ways. And I think that is the way forward. I think history has a way of sort of going full circle, and that's how it was done, sort of in times gone past, and then we moved to this age where where we were convinced or that we had to buy a different product to tackle a different need. And in essence, you don't really need to do that. If you are wise and savvy enough, you can buy a product which can tame your hair, condition your hair, act as a body moisturizer, act as a cleanser, act as a moisturizer. It's just how you customize it and how you use it. And I do think that that's the way forward to encourage less waste, less waste of resources, to sort of try and limit pollution in creating all these different products that you don't essentially need, when you can invest wisely and have one thing that can do many jobs for you or tackle issues for you. I think that is the way forward, and that has been a core principle of Soap and Skins, to try and give that to our consumers, give them the choice. There may well be, we have consumers who, for example, buy our elixir and actually say, we only like to use it in our hair, we don't want to use it for our face, and that's fine. But knowing you can, if you wanted to, and knowing people that are able to, or people who have chosen to, is just a little small step in the right direction to encourage less waste and be a little bit more resourceful and mindful of our planet.
Yeah, and it's such a mainstay of like the traditional beauty industry, the age-old beauty halls and how we're marketed to, and I think there's still a huge market there. But Vanessa, do you think people are starting to wise up to these terms, to greenwashing, to unethical business practices, and how do you think it's going to change in the industry in the next few years?
Definitely, I think people are becoming more aware of like greenwashing and things like that, and they are being able to read ingredient lists better as well. And I think like we could touch on it now, but the Think Dirty app and things like that as well, that people can now just like have their phone and check products and things like that to see if they are like synthetic ingredients, and if the companies are greenwashing and things like that. So people have like even Google as well, just to check ingredients and things like that, and even like the backstories of companies. It's so easy to check things like that. So I think people are doing that.
Good. Okay, last question, because we've had so much interaction today, which has been fantastic. I'm sorry that we've not been able to get to everyone's questions, but last question for me is, in your switch, what products have been really difficult to swap? Vanessa, what would you say is difficult, and do you have any advice for people?
For me, because we're a family of 5, for me it's been toothpaste, because I've tried so many different brands, and trying to find ones that are plastic free as well. And then my children, they hate the taste of every single one, and taste is like the main thing for them. So that has been like the most difficult thing for us to swap. So every month we've got different toothpaste we're trying out, and I don't like any of them really. So.
Have you got one that they're maybe edging towards, or are you still undecided? No, oh gosh. Toothpaste is difficult, and I think it's also the texture as well, because we're so used to that, like Robbie was saying earlier, the frothiness and the texture in your mouth. Like it's quite an unusual thing to swap. It's very sensation focused as well as the feel on your teeth. So yeah, that's a great one. I think for me it would either be deodorant or shampoo, because they're both really difficult. Robbie knows the story already, but I've tried so many natural deodorants, didn't want anything with aluminium, and I had been quite a sweaty person growing up, so I'd always use really strong deodorant, so my armpits were so just needing a detox, and the transition took about 6 months, and I just had this awful smell, and I would sweat more, and it was just atrocious. But now I very rarely wear deodorant. If I do, it's the Cacao Pow Deo Bar, which is fantastic. It's almost like an antiperspirant, which is incredible for a natural deodorant. But yeah, that was a big change for me. Rabia, how about you?
And funnily enough, it's those two as well. I think it's been deodorant, and also shampoo. Shampoo's been really tricky, to find something that's sort of sulfate free, but obviously ethical and also a little bit more mindful and sustainable. That's been so. I mean, we're a family, a household of 5 people, and obviously go through a lot of shampoo. And it's just been really tough to find something that the children are happy to use as well, because they're so conditioned to pumping things from a bottle as opposed to having a shampoo bar or a shampoo conditioner bar or something like that. So that's been the hardest, the most difficult one switch to make, for us as a family.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm lucky. It's just the two of us, but I don't think I could handle having more people in on the argument because we're always debating which is good and which is bad. I'm just going to squeeze one more question in because Shakira's just asked a really great one just at the end, and then I promise we'll let you get on with your evenings. But what are your top 3 products that you swapped out? So we talked about the hardest, but what would you say are your kind of like best or favorite products that you've swapped out, and you can mention your own ranges as well if you do, if I'm sure they're a big part of your regimes. Vanessa, what are your top 3?
Oh, mine would be like body butter because like we obviously after showering and everything, moisturising your skin. So because I make obviously my own, we don't have to because like a family of 5 as well. Using that every day and everything is a lot that we get through. Because like my body butter in a week, I mean the 200, what is it, 150 grams, we probably get through it in about a week. So it is like if I was buying that as well, that would be quite expensive.
Yes.
So it's a good thing that I make my own. So yeah, that body butter, I think, and that's what was the question again?
What are your top 3 products that you've swapped out?
For me as well, my facial products because I make my own cleansing products as well for my face and that, so I don't have to buy those anymore as well. And like moisturising my face as well, so like my own facial oil and that. So those are probably like the things that I use the most. That yeah, I don't have to buy anymore really.
Yeah. Rabia, how about you?
Oh gosh, that's a hard
It's
one.
hard.
The difficult one to just narrow it down to 3. Uh, I think, the my favorite probably switch has to be the elixir. We go through that a lot in our family, and it's one of those things. It's our argan oil and orange blossom elixir, which was inspired by a Berber beauty ritual. And literally, I use that in my daughter's hair, in my hair, as like a pre-conditioning treatment. I use that as my moisturizer and nothing else as my moisturizer. And my husband even uses that as his beard oil as well. So that's probably one of the most, we use that a lot. The other one would probably be, again, like Vanessa said, it was her body butter, but for us, it has to be our SOS balm. My son has eczema, I get dermatitis, and that's been our staple in terms of moisturizing. I actually even use it to cleanse when I'm having a bout of dermatitis on my face. It's just the loveliest feeling on my face to cleanse. It moisturizes, it really heals as well because there's honey in there. So the SOS balm and probably our soap. Just because again, it's gentle enough, being SLS free and organic, gentle enough to use on your face. We use it on our hands and in the body. So those are our 3 biggest success stories in terms of swaps as a family that we all sort of use on a regular basis.
Yeah. I think for me is the deodorant, so cacao power deo bar. My ancestor's period cup, I've swapped that, and I've not bought tampons for well over a year, so that's a really, really good swap for me. And for skincare, it's got to be cleansing balm. So I love a cleansing balm, so I swap. Like I do use yours sometimes, your SOS balm. We use that in our ritual the other week. The AD Skin Synergy Cleansing Balm is amazing, and the Sylvan Skincare Radiance Balm is great because you can use it as a moisturizer, as a cleanser, as a massage balm, everything. So that's that's my travel companion. So yeah, cleansing balm. I've got about 10 different cleansing balms. I love them. But yes. Okay, so we will wrap it up now. But thank you so much, everyone, for watching and asking all those questions. I really hope you found it useful. I know it's a huge, absolutely massive topic. So yeah, if you do have any other questions, feel free to send us an email. You can contact us via the website, and then I've popped links to both Vanessa and Rabia's ranges in the comments as well, if you want to check those out, if you like the sound of any of those products that we've done tonight. So this is probably our last live stream for a little while. We're going to take a little break, but you can check us out on Instagram, where we also are doing lots of regular videos on there as well. So it's Blomma Beauty. And thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks for your expertise tonight, guys. It was really good fun.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
No worries.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.